Hello everybody and welcome to Cryptic Corvid, the channel devoted to talking about everything crime, cryptid, and conspiracy. Let's get right into it. So despite the fact that my voice sounds like a prepubescent middle schooler, I am in fact an adult, and every month my family does this extended family dinner or lunch or something for fun, I guess. Now I could spend time with the other adults in my family if they weren't all incredibly boring, so instead I spend time with my younger cousins. Anyways, last time we did this, we played a board game called Colt Express, which is a Wild West game that's actually really fun if you overlook the rather dated expression of ethnic minorities. So the game got me thinking about the Wild West, and you see, I'm what the industry calls an idiot, and thought all the depictions of Wild West stories were entirely fictitious, or really exaggerated. So I searched it up, and well, I'm sure you've seen the time code, so now we're here. So, before I get into this absolutely insane train heist story, shout out to the realest penguin I know, Gentleman, a guy with a life way too interesting for his own demeanor. Check him out if you like short stories, interesting stuff. It's just kind of fun, small stuff to watch. So, yeah, and if you like what you see here today, don't forget to like and subscribe. Maybe comment if you're cool like that. Alright, let's get into it. February 15th, 1900, Fairbank, Arizona. Fairbank was a small town, paling in comparison to the more lively Tombstone about 16 kilometers or 10 miles to the east. Though the town was small, it had a general store, a fancy hotel, a schoolhouse, and very lively people. That evening, many had gathered near the north end of the Fairbank train station, waiting for the New Mexico-Arizona line train. It was expected to make a stop coming from the city of Nogales about 97 kilometers or 60 miles down south, carrying gold and coins up north. The train was beloved by the townsfolk due to the unique glamour the engine brought to the small town. Now, of course the people there were making noise, but especially 5 drunken cowboys, all yapping at one another loudly. Now these 5 men were as follows: Three-Fingered Jack Dunlop, Bravo Juan Yolas, Bob Brown, and brothers George and Louis Owens. Now, this caught the attention of Sheriff Thomas Broderick, who happened to see these men but didn't really care because, it wasn't his county. And, I can respect that. I mean, it's not in his paycheck. So, anyways. Meanwhile, on the train, Giga Chad and former Texas Ranger Jeff Milton was working for Wells Fargo Bank. Interestingly enough, he wasn't actually supposed to be on that train. He had actually arranged a meeting with Deputy Sheriff Billy Stiles to discuss a mining property near Nogales, but unfortunately got called in last minute because his co-worker had gotten sick. But we'll come back to this later, I swear this is actually important. So the train pulls in, people crowding at its wonder and all, and the 5 cowboys all go quiet. The door swings open, revealing the express manager, Jeff Milton, who, if you knew who he was, you'd probably stop whatever you're gonna do, but these cowboys didn't know any better. One of the men fires at Milton, hitting him. Wounded but still conscious, Milton reaches for a loaded shotgun that he had propped up against the door. He fires, hitting Three-Fingered Jack in the stomach, and the spread hit Bravo Juan in the leg. The shot deterred the men long enough for Milton to hide the key to the Wells Fargo safe the men had been looking for, all before he passed out. The men searched for the key frantically, but when they noticed Sheriff Broderick was approaching, they took what they could, a little tin money box, grabbed their wounded comrade, and ran off into the night, defeated. I should note they had horses, they didn't just sprint, although it would be funny if they did. Anyways, robbing this train, even just attempting, was incredibly dumb, because the train had been pivotal in the advancement of the West's economic development. It had formed a sort of community or culture across the towns that were connected by it. And an attack on that train was basically an attack on everyone, and one hell of a way to speedrun making enemies. So the word travels fast via riders and the telegram, which, if you don't know what that is, it's basically this little device that sends Morse code messages, kinda like text, but way harder to understand. Anywho, this message reaches Wilcox about 65 kilometers or 40 miles away, where we are introduced to one of our 2 protagonists, Bert Alvord, the deputy sheriff who, once hearing this news from the local telegrapher, sets out towards Fairbank. And our other protagonist, Billy Stiles, who, if you'll remember, was supposed to meet Jeff Milton, but was stood up because of the last-minute shift change, so he decides to head towards Wilcox, and as he passes by Fairbank, he sees the crowd of possemen. So Billy approaches, where he sees Bert Alvord, seething. Bert informs Billy of what happened to Jeff Milton, who is still alive, how the county sheriff, Scott White, is away on business, and about what he knows about the Fairbank robbery. Billy tries to calm Bert down to no real avail, where the two vow to take down the Fairbank robbers. Okay, freeze. So you're probably wondering what's up with Bert and Billy, the two sheriffs with a determination that seems out of nowhere, but it's not. Let's start with Bert. Bert, having been born to a respected and hero of a father, was thrust into a life with expectations of fame, of glory, and all the sorts. What's more, when he was younger, he had witnessed a famous shooting in Tombstone, an event that sparked even more of a desire to join the best of the West, so he became a lawman. He was pretty well known around the area, unfortunately not always for his acts of justice, such as the time he killed a cowboy, causing a ruckus in his town, in self-defense to be fair. He was also known to be an irritable drunk, often using his badge to settle scores and spending most of his days in saloons, but he tried and people knew it. On the other hand, Billy Stiles similarly had the desire to achieve glory and riches. He knew that he likely wouldn't leave a mark as a deputy sheriff, but he was committed to being a lawman. He was kind, he had a conscience, with a certain understanding about others and what they were going through. Now the two had become friends, and often spoke to each other about the glory they could achieve, the reputation for themselves and their family. It may have sounded like a pipe dream, but it was real to them. But this train robbery gets even more personal for the two men, because September 11th, 1899, a South Pacific train was due at 9 p.m. at Cochise Station, about 16 kilometers or 10 miles southwest of Wilcox, when a pair of bandits caught the train's attention as it climbed a rather steep incline. They did this by using a red lantern, which was the universal sign for danger up ahead on the track. When the train stopped, they boarded, threatening the lives of the engineer and the brakeman, and demanding they open the door to the safe. Eventually, after some struggle, they blew off the roof of the train door and to the door of the safe with dynamite, where they took the money and then proceeded to rob the train's passengers before disappearing into the night. Okay, now this isn't really important, but reportedly there was a guy who, after the bandits had left, crawled out from under his seat where he was cowering and shot rounds from his gun into the air for seemingly no reason, to which the brakeman, walked up to him, confiscated his gun, and told him to sit down. So, life really do be a sitcom. What's more, and this kind of just made me smile, apparently, according to the victims, the two were very polite robbers. That's nice. I mean, for criminals, of course. Anyways, Cochise County Deputy Sheriffs Bert Alvord and Billy Stiles assisted County Sheriff Scott White in attempting to find the two bandits, but had no luck. It was very defeating for the two lawmen, especially because they had a desire to be law enforcement legends. So, two men with big hopes, bigger dreams, faced with failure, and one hell of a score to settle with train robbers, forming two posses to track down the train robbers. Now there was actually one more party, formed by William Downing, who was a friend of Bert's. He might be important later, perchance. Okay, so now back to the main story, specifically the robbers. Now, the five men were defeated and wounded. They were lucky to get away with anything at all, let alone their lives, but at least they had a head start. Now, believe it or not, these seemingly uncoordinated, bumbling outlaws were actually not at all bad at what they did. They were all crooks, some with big reputations, such as Three-Finger Jack Dunlop, with various scores under his belt. You see, this was their first job together, and they were all victims of a crappy coincidence. One man got sick and boom, they were dealing with a famous Texas Ranger. But they got out of it. The men talked a bit as they rode east towards the Dragoons. All had unique backgrounds and places to go, but before they parted ways, they took out that little tin of money and cracked it open, only to find $42, which, to be fair, is around $1,400 American in today's money, but admittedly not enough to throw away their lives for. The men knew this, especially George, who threw the money to the ground. This prompted Lewis to grab the money off the ground. He gave everybody $10, except for Jack, who he stood above, realizing he wasn't going to make it, so he slid the last $2 into his pocket. Bravo Juan decided to head south towards Mexico, which the others were fine with because apparently he was complaining about his leg wound. The brothers wanted to go to their home outside Pierce on the other side of the Dragoons. And lastly, Bob Brown was heading towards Texas, riding with Jack. This is all in good until Jack falls off his horse. Bob Brown, feeling sorry for the man, drops off the horse as well. He looks down at Jack's body, who is still alive somehow, but doesn't look like he's going to make it for long. So Brown gives him a small container of whiskey to help with the pain. He pats him on the back and rides off towards Texas. Now Billy, Bert, and friend of Bert's, William Downing, had all formed search posses, but unfortunately they would fail time and time again to get any evidence. It was frustrating for the men, to say the least, demoralizing to all of them, but most of all, Bert and Billy. However, it wouldn't be long until the renowned Sheriff White would return from his trip. Having heard of the news, he quickly assembled a team of much more qualified men than the other posses before re-interviewing witnesses and riding down San Pedro River. They rode down the river for quite a while before, lo and behold, they found a bloody trail. At the end of it was a man curled up and bloodied next to a burning cactus. The man awoke to his foot catching on fire, 11 out of 10 alarm by the way, and was soon rescued by the sheriff's men. Now funny enough, or not, I don't know, you decide, posse men would often compete with one another to see who could get the most evidence for the case in situations like these. And in this scenario, it's kind of funny because Bert, Billy, and William, they're all, spending all this time looking, gathering, people to look for this information to no avail at all. Scott White shows up and immediately finds Three Finger Jack, one of the most notorious of the five men. And I have to wonder, was it because they were the only ones who interviewed, or were they just better in every way, shape, and form? I don't know. Regardless, sizable L from the other groups. Now Jack, though dying, was saved by none other than Dr. George Goodfellow, a tombstone doctor who had become so familiar with gunshot wounds and his innovative ways of helping them, earned the title of the Gunshot Doctor, which might be the hardest name of all time. I guess it's more of a title, but I digress. The Gunshot Doctor had recently saved the life of Jeff Milton, and now had to perform a miracle to prolong the life of Jack Dunlap long enough for them to get information from him. And lo and behold, he did it. Well, for 2 days. He kept him alive for 2 days, and they questioned him constantly to no avail, until the last, where he realized that, after being betrayed and left for dead, that he had nothing to lose really from ratting out the others. Now, back with Bert Alvord and William Downing, who were very demoralized having to write these long reports about how they found nothing again, ended up at the same saloon. I would pronounce it, but I would butcher it so horribly, so I'm just going to put it up on screen and hope for the best. Downing said to Bert that they had found Jack, but he hadn't talked yet, from what he had heard, of course. And Bert, none the wiser, went to give his posse report, only to be met with gun barrels and a warrant, because Bert Alvord was not just the sheriff, he was also the leader of the 5 outlaws, and he wasn't alone. William Downing and another were arrested as the other 2 of the 4 masterminds, the last being, you guessed it, Billy Stiles. Now Billy was still out late with his posse men, and the news of Jack's arrest hit him early enough to let him think about what he would do. After dismissing the men, Billy thought for a while and decided finally to turn himself in and provide testimonies against everyone, provided he was not given prison time. He also reportedly grew a bit of a conscience and wanted to do something good by catching all these criminals for all the bad that he had done. And whether or not that's true is entirely up to your own interpretation. But anyways, just like that, the brothers in Pierce, Bravo in Mexico, and Bob Brown in Texas were all caught. Now you would think that that would be the end of this story, but no, it gets much more bizarre. So let's go back to September 11th, 1899. 4 men are sitting at the corner of a saloon, laughing loudly. Bert, Billy, William, and one more unnamed man. It's getting closer to 9 when the unnamed man and Billy Stiles crawl out of the window of the saloon. The men hop on horseback and race to the incline, stop the train, blow up the safe, rob the passengers, and hightail it out, making off with about $30,000, which is around 1 million USD today, only to crawl back in through the window off to the saloon, before being called into duty to find the devious train robbers that had just struck. Turns out these 4 men were actually a gang undercover as men trying to catch themselves. But they got greedy, wanted to do it again, and now here they all are, in prison cells, awaiting trials. Save for Billy Stiles, of course, who seemed to earn the trust of the authorities again after his whole moral ordeal. And that's it. The end. I'm just kidding. No, it has one of the coldest endings of all time. So Bert is standing across his old friend, whom I forgot to mention, but he's not really important until right now, George Bravin, who is the prison warden. George looks down at Bert, who had fallen from the glory he had sought, only for the door to swing open and Billy Stiles to walk in. For a visit, supposedly. Bert, who had lost everything, and Stiles, who had betrayed everyone. They lock eyes until suddenly, Billy pulls out a gun in a quick motion, before turning around and demanding that Brevin release all the prisoners. When the warden refuses, he shoots off his toes and lets everyone free himself. But when the warden pleads to the men not to give away their chances in court, all but two return there. Bert and Bravo. Bravo hightails it out of there, as Bert and Billy ride into the distance, destined to repeat the whole game again. There's a fine line between lawman and outlaw, but these men, they like to tightrope. And that's actually the end of this crazy story. So yeah, like I said, this is an insane story, insane crime. It's very popular from what I understand for being like the last big Wild West crime on like the train and everything. It was a big moment that kind of started an era of peace, not directly, but you know, it was a divide between will the Wild West continue or is it over? So yeah, I absolutely really enjoyed this story. I hope that other people do as well. If you did, please go check out the original source there in the description. Please go support them because, you know, they wrote it out much better than I did. I just kind of reworded it and talked about it differently. So, yeah, check them out. Thank you all so much for watching. Love yourself, treat others with love and kindness, and I'll see you next time on Cryptic Corvid. Adios.